Welcome to the Vet Med Wellness and Leadership Podcast, where we discuss central challenges vet med leaders face, such as burnout, stress, and difficult interactions with clients and staff, just to name a few. In each episode, you will hear about actionable solutions that you can apply to your practice and invitations to connect with fellow leaders who are passionate about improving the wellness of the vet med profession. By subscribing, liking, commenting, or sharing this podcast, you are helping more veterinary professionals find the resources shared in these episodes. Thank you in advance for listening and supporting this show. I hope you enjoy it. All right. Hi, everybody. Crystal Stokes here. And today we have several guests joining us to talk about Veterinary Hope Foundation, which envisions a world where every veterinary professional is a part of a community of mutual support and growth. They aspire to build a community where individuals find the support, resources, and connections they need to thrive, both personally and professionally, all while nurturing hope for the veterinary profession. So let's start off today with introductions. How about Dr. Elizabeth? Could you start us off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Chosa. I am a veterinarian. I've been a clinician since 2005. Worked in a lot of different aspects of the veterinary field, and I co-founded Veterinary Hope Foundation in 2021 as a way to give back to this profession that I love so much.
Nice. And let's go ahead and just roll right into Dr. Laurie.
Hi, I'm Laurie Fonken. I am one of the board members of the Veterinary Hope Foundation. My background is in veterinary mental health and well-being. I was at Colorado State University for 13 years, directing their health and wellness programs for their College of Veterinary Medicine. And I've been working with veterinary professionals probably for 17 years now, 18 years, really focused on how to be a whole, healthy human being while practicing veterinary medicine, which means mind, body, emotions, spirit, and how to bring that to not only your professional work, but also to your personal life.
Oh, beautiful. And Dr. Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy VanDeventer. I am a small animal practitioner since 1995, and I was a participant in one of the Veterinary Hope Foundation's early groups.
Fun. And Dr. Trish.
Hey, I am Dr. Trish, who is practicing in New Jersey as a small animal general practitioner. I've been a GP since 2006, had a few jobs, saw a lot of things. I was really, really excited to find Veterinary Hope Foundation. It came into my life at a time I really needed it, and I've loved it and had been a part of 3 of their groups so far.
Awesome. That is great. So we have a nice panel here that I think can give a very much like a 360 view of what's going on at Veterinary Hope Foundation. And I'll just preface this by saying, if you're listening now, you should probably keep checking in on Veterinary Hope Foundation because they're growing and evolving continuously. So what you hear today may not be what it continues to be in the future as they add more programs. But let's just go back in time and start with the origin story. I thought maybe Elizabeth, you can go back in time and tell us how this all began.
Sure. So back in March of 2021, there was a particular week in our profession when we lost 3 colleagues to suicide in 1 week. And the profession as a whole was really, I think the feeling of despair was really pervasive. And everybody was talking about it on social media. Lots of pain and hurting and questioning whether anybody could be happy in this profession, whether there was any hope for the future. Lots of talking about different problems. I didn't see a lot of talking about solutions or path forward. And so I had a conversation with my friend Blair McConnell, who is also a veterinarian who works primarily in industry. And we just talked for a long time about the problems and whether there was anything we could do to try to help. We knew that there were resources for veterinarians in crisis, and we started exploring those resources more and just tried to figure out if there was anything we could do to augment what was available at the time and to sort of try to intervene and help support veterinarians before they were in crisis, sort of preventive care, if you will, for mental health for veterinarians. We all know preventive care is really important for our patients, So what would preventive care for mental health look like? And how could we take tangible action to start to make a positive difference? So we partnered with mental health professionals right away. Dr. Laurie Fonken is one of those. And we knew we couldn't do this by ourselves. So after some informal polling and research, and then some official sort of market research, we landed at a place for peer support groups. And we wanted to accomplish two goals right out of the gate. One was to provide tangible resources for veterinarians and to really empower them to find a path forward, to bring hope back to them, remind them of the passion that they felt for this profession when they first got started, and really help them figure out, why am I hurting? Am I hurting? How can I live my best life as a veterinarian and bring my whole self to a place where I feel like I belong? And how do I want my life to look, and how do I get there? And so that was part of it. And then the other part of it is we really wanted to build community. We knew that a lot of veterinarians who end up in a mental health crisis feel really isolated. We have a hard time, as most of us are either perfectionists or recovering perfectionists. And it's really hard for us to admit when we're struggling, and it's even harder for us to reach out to people when we need help or when we need support. And so what we wanted was to try to build real connection and real support, so that the next time these people had a bad day, they already had people they knew that they could trust, where they felt safe, where they felt understood and seen. And the best place to find that would be with other veterinarians who really understood their struggle. And so we created these online support groups that are facilitated by trained licensed mental health professionals. Laurie led the first 3 groups, which were sort of our pilot groups. We weren't sure if anyone would even show up, and we weren't sure if they showed up, if it would make a difference in their lives or not. And we weren't sure if it would really build a lasting community. And we just had to be brave and try it. And thankfully, it has been super rewarding. And we have been able to really make a lot of positive difference in the lives of our participants. And so, as you said, we are looking now at ways that we can affect systemic change in the profession and make an even bigger positive difference. But I think our support groups are always going to be the cornerstone for us, because making a difference one life at a time, 8 lives at a time, and continuing to build this community of support is what we really envision for the future.
I love it. A show of hands, how many people here have felt hopeless at some point in their vet med journey? How many? Oh, right. Yes, that's all of us. How many people here struggled with that sense of community and feeling like we were completely alone in that awful feeling? Hands up. Yes, all of us. So I think that we are talking, the people listening here we're all birds of a feather. Probably many of us can relate to this journey and the need for something like this. Can you also, I'll stick with you, Elizabeth, just speak to some of the most common pain points that you are currently working with, that when people come into these groups, what would you say are the top, 2 to 4 pain points that present? Yeah, so we tend to focus our discussions around the same topics repeatedly, depending on the needs of the group and the participants, of course. But some of them are things like, how do you set healthy boundaries? How do you find true compassion for yourself? Finding, you have to believe that you are worthy of living a good life. That's kind of the first step to finding your path, is believing that it's worth your time and energy to really focus on yourself and be compassionate to yourself, that you are valuable just the way you are, that you don't have to be perfect or meet any certain criteria to be worthy of having a good life and worthy of being loved. And so that's one of the big topics. And then healthy boundaries is sort of a part of then finding those next steps. We talk about conflict resolution. We talk about identifying what are your true values, what holds the most meaning for you, and is the life you're living allowing you to live in accordance with those values? And if not, what would have to be true for you to get there so that you wouldn't be in moral distress on a regular basis? So those are just some of the kind of highlights.
It reminds me of something that we touched on when I was in my master's program, was looking at different cultures and the cultural messages that we receive and how they're different depending on where you live. Like, I've lived in different countries where the belief system is really different. So in the United States, our culture is very much around our worth and value being based on our performance or what we produce. So that message is kind of like fish in water. We don't realize we're swimming in water, but we're swimming in this culture that says you're kind of worthless unless you make some money or you achieve something or you're performing. If you're just chilling, you're worthless. Like, that's the inner message. I think to debunk that, to really look at that message and say, is it true? Do I want to subscribe to that? And I remember something that happened a lot was somebody saying to me, does a newborn kitten have value? And I'd be like, yeah, of course. Does a baby have value and worth? Yes. Are they earning it? Are they doing anything productive? No. They're going to the bathroom in their diaper. They're eating and drinking. They're crying. They're needy, but they're super valuable and super worthy. And I was like, oh, wow, my mind is exploding right now, because it's hard to apply that to ourselves as grown adults that are productive. So I really appreciate you all bringing that in as a foundational piece. And I'd love to hear from you, Laurie, since you're so integral in the development of this as a mental health professional and piloting the first 3 groups. Can you talk more about the programs that you have and what you all work on?
Sure. Thank you. It was really important for me I loved the Veterinary Hope Foundation right off the bat, because the focus was on what can we do, not all the things that are missing from life, which we tend to focus on what's not there or what's not going well. We really were focused on what can we do with what we have to create something that will be meaningful to people. And so we started right off the bat trying to figure out what the themes would be for folks. And we did some pilot surveys to just see what are the things that people really want to talk about. And from there, I created these 6 modules for the support group. And then we put out a message that we were going to offer these 3 pilot groups. And we had full participation in all 3. And the beauty of it was that and they were all women, because we went through the DVM moms group. So the connections were right off the bat. I mean, first session, because everyone had a common experience. And not only are they veterinarians and practicing, they're also moms. And so bringing them together with that common core and thread was really important. And then everyone was able to share, and we didn't have to go into deep detail sometimes. Somebody could say a procedure they did that day, and everyone on the call would be like, oh, yeah, I get it. So there was just this knowing among the groups, and they started communicating with each other right away and continued to communicate. And I think to this day, some groups still communicate. So it really did create that environment of support. That was one of the most important things for me. And it has been since even when I worked with the students, was making sure that every student had someone, one person, 2 people that they could call when they were in that place of aloneness, despair, feeling really isolated, because that isolation is where we get into trouble. So knowing that you have at least one person that you can reach out to that will understand you. You don't have to explain the whole thing. They'll just say, I'll sit here with you in this. So that was really important. And I think that's what we created in a safe space for folks. And as we move forward, we've expanded those groups. We do affinity groups. So those were all DVM moms, but we do AABP groups with bovine practitioners. We're looking at intern groups and house officer groups and groups for owners, groups for technicians. So we're trying to really be inclusive of all the different areas of veterinary medicine and provide services for those. And of course, they'll be unique, because every different affinity group has unique needs, issues, things that they want to focus on. So we're very fortunate that our board is willing to say, what do you need? What will work for your organization? Okay, let's try it. We can say, let's try it. If it doesn't work, we'll readjust. But that has been such a freedom for me, coming from a place where that wasn't always the answer I got. Let's try it. It was always, well, we don't have the money, or we don't have the people, or we don't have the time. And so it's just been so refreshing to say, let's try it. Okay, let's try it.
That was one of the things that really drew me to you all when we met. And then our first few meetings of getting to know each other. I think we have a similar value system around that spirit of innovation and piloting things and just giving it a try and being a yes person rather than a no person, looking for solutions rather than saying all the reasons something won't work. And similarly with my company at Full Circle Lab, we're very responsive. Like, we respond to what people need. So instead of having a cookie cutter template that we put up on top of every single organization or every single individual, we don't. Like, there's no cookie cutter model. And I think that people value that. They feel like when they're a part of something that is organically growing alongside of them, that it feels more like home. And I really am eager to hear now from, Amy and Trish. You two were some of the early adopters. You've been in the program. So I'd love to know more about, maybe we can start with Trish. If you can tell us about your experiences. But can we start, though, before you came in? Where were you in your life, and what were you struggling with, and what were you hoping for before you found Veterinary Hope Foundation?
Absolutely. So I've done 3 groups, and the very, very first one, I think, was one of the first groups with Dr. Laurie. I had heard about Veterinary Hope Foundation through the veterinary Facebook group, the DVM Moms. I jumped at the chance. Elizabeth was posting some things, looking for volunteers to join the groups, to try to pilot the groups. And I was like, I don't know do it. And she's like, well, this group's full. So I think I missed the first group. And I was like, because I was really excited. I needed something. I graduated in 2006, and I think my first group was in, 2021? Were we? So I was well into my career, but I was raising 2 small children, and I was at a practice that was very, very difficult to be in. I was struggling with my boss, who was the practice owner, very close-minded gentleman, and he didn't have a lot of respect for women and mothers even. And I was really trying to do my best when I showed up, and I just felt like it wasn't good enough no matter what I did. And I was working and being a mom. I just was feeling like a failure on a lot of different levels. And I was just looking for ways to evolve at that point. I didn't want to stay where I was. I felt very stuck. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know if I wanted to own my own practice. I didn't know if I wanted to jump ship and join a different practice, or if I should do relief. I was really stuck. It came along at a perfect time for me. When I joined Dr. Laurie's group, I loved every week. And I think I had to miss 1 week, and I literally cried. And then the very last week of it, I joined from my car because I was trying. And I was like, I don't want it to end. We clicked. Like Dr. Laurie said, that first group was magic. We all had a common denominator at so many levels. We were moms and vets. But to this day, that group, we're still in touch, and it's been years. And we still meet up at conferences. I text with several of them daily. They are my grounding people now. I mean, I had friends in the veterinary field. We all kind of do. But when you go through the therapy and the processes together that Dr. Laurie guides you through, you get to hear everybody else's deeper struggles. With my other friends, who are my vet friends, I don't get into the whole compassion fatigue is getting to me today. We just how are you? I had a bad case. Yeah, it wasn't deep. But I feel like the women that I was in that first group with, we really deeply connected on a lot of different levels that we're not open about usually. So I feel like they understand me better, and I understand them better. It was a great group. And I also was a part of the grief and loss group, which I thought was an amazing group to start. I was like, well, what is this? I need this in my life. I experienced a really profound loss in my life with the death of my mother. And it's still I'm never going to be the same. So I joined that group, and it was helpful. It was very supportive, and everybody was going through some sort of level of grief in their life. And I really enjoyed getting to that point, getting deep in those sessions. It was therapy for me, because I kind of pushed the grief down. So in those sessions, I got to deal with it a little bit more. And it was, the journey with that was definitely different. And then the third group I was a part of was the practice owner group, because of my first initial group for Veterinary Hope Foundation, it really helped me turn the tables. I got some confidence, and I am now a practice owner, and it helped me. I am in a way better place than I was before I started this group. So I'm so thankful for Veterinary Hope Foundation. I am the biggest cheerleader, and I will shout it from the rooftops.
Wow, I'm crying. Just so you know. That
that's why this exists, right? Like that is exactly why you're here. Laurie, could you speak to how did you create that safe container? Like it's so clear that Trish felt so safe to go deep in these ways that we don't get to have in our regular day-to-day life. So what's the magic formula for creating that space?
Oh, that's a hard question for me to answer. I think part of it was the guidelines that we have for the group around confidentiality. Everything we share in there is confidential, that we're not there necessarily to give advice to one another. If people ask for advice, certainly we'll offer. We're really there to just genuinely listen. I learned this from Dr. Rachel Remen, who is really a pioneer in generous listening and working with physicians and veterinarians around hearing the whole story without judgment and just accepting the person where they are. No one needs to be fixed. No one's broken. We're all coming here together in a common space to support one another, and allowing that. I do feel like my years of experience in running groups and working with people helps me with that. It's just part of what I do and what I know and kind of who I am. So I think that's a piece of it as well. And then the group trusting each other and bringing their whole selves and being able to be vulnerable and willing to be vulnerable in that space and having it be okay, knowing that it's okay. And being seen. So all of those components, but it's kind of like a magic mixture of things that come together. So the setting, the person, the people, all of that is really important. You don't know that you're going to have that. Yeah. Obviously, some groups don't go in the same way. And yet it feels like, from what I hear, most groups have a sense of that even if the facilitator doesn't create that, they learn how to create that amongst themselves, which is really a beautiful thing to see.
It's beautiful. Amy, I'd love to hear your story of where you were before Veterinary Hope Foundation and what drew you to it. Then what happened?
So I was working in a privately held hospital that had we were on a really rough path together. And I had a good community there within the hospital, but we were all sort of treading water, waiting for something to happen. And I realized that I was drifting further and further away from who I believe that I am. Just hanging on for dear life is not how I like to lead my life. I like to take the bull by the horns, but I couldn't quite see the path, how to get back to who I am. And so I had a sabbatical coming up, and Veterinary Hope Foundation had an opening, and I made the first meeting from my trailer in Yellowstone National Park with very spotty Wi-Fi, and we made the connection, and I am so happy that I did that. We have 5 people in my group, and all small animal practitioners, but not all of us moms. We have a lot of differences amongst our lives. I had been out in practice for 27 years, I think, at that point, and one of my compadres had only been out 2 years, and we still made a fantastic connection, and we've stuck together. We do still check in every week or two. Somebody shoots out a text, what's going on in their lives, and good, bad, or indifferent, we take care of each other. And that's been a really big boon. All of us have had significant changes in our lives in the last couple of years. Job changes. I just came off of an 11-month sabbatical, actually, which I don't think I would have necessarily had the bravery to do that and to really commit to making some big changes for myself, which I've done in this last year. So I'm now back in practice with someone that I mentored when she was in high school, and she is now the practice owner. And when she asked me how many hours, what do I want to work? I absolutely told her exactly what I want to work, and that is what I'm doing. So it's, I defined what it was that I wanted to do in veterinary medicine, and I'm making it happen.
It's like that full circle thing where you used to be a take the bull by the horns person. You fell to the bottom where you lost the ability to do that temporarily. And then through Veterinary Hope Foundation and this work you've done, you're back in control and taking charge and owning it.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're telling these stories for people that don't know anything about VHF here, but that made me cry again. I don't get to hear these stories, This is why we created this foundation to begin with. And the thing is, every single veterinarian and team members and practice managers, all of these people already are capable, smart, amazing human beings who just need the right type of support and encouragement, who need a safe space where they can be themselves and be seen, like Laurie said, be seen. We've heard that over and over again from participants. I had somebody come up to me at a conference that I'd never met before, and she said, I think you're the co-founder of Veterinary Hope Foundation. I said, I am. And she said, I just want you to know I felt more seen in my first session of Veterinary Hope Foundation. I'm getting choked up. Ever in my whole life, and man, I just want to give that to everybody. Every human being, needs that. And certainly every veterinarian needs a place where they can just be themselves and not be afraid to be vulnerable, because vulnerability is not a weakness. It's a source of strength. Once you can really be your truest self and have people still like you, still value you, gosh, that's a gift. And I haven't always had that in my life. And I see how powerful it is. And this organization is so much bigger than me, than Laurie, than us, because the power is really in the participants. Because, we have those 6 sessions with them, but then they start taking care of each other, and they support each other, and they help each other grow, and they give each other a safe place to land and a shoulder to cry on and a cheerleader and all the things that we all need in our lives. And even though I know these women a little bit, it's like to hear these stories just feels so good. And I just hope that we can keep going and keep changing lives, because it's really encouraging and exciting.
It's so true. It's so well said. I was reflecting on my own experiences with groups when I was in my early 20s, and I joined a therapy group. And I know that Veterinary Hope Foundation is not technically therapy, but there's something about coming together in a supportive space where there's confidentiality and safety for the purpose of sharing and exploring. And to this day, so that was about 20 years ago, if I go back home, I will contact that therapist and ask, can I just pop in? And she's like, absolutely. And I just pop in as hey, I was here 20 years ago, and it impacted me so much that I decided to become a therapist. That's how impactful it was, of that journey of that kind of support, both individual and in group. It's just transformative. And I think you're right that the vulnerability piece is, once you connect with that, you just feel unstoppable in the way we can come together. I was reminded of, as you were talking, of, I think we really do need to touch on what some of the barriers might be to entering into a group like this. Because I know my younger self, if I had heard about something like this, I think I would have had a lot of internal chatter going on that might have been holding me back from something that I really, truly needed and deep down knew that I wanted, but getting over that hump of actually signing up or making the call. I'd love for any of you to speak to this. If any of you have experienced it yourself, had barriers before you joined, or if you are on the receiving end of bringing people into the group and you might be hearing people talk through barriers, let's just address that, because I think for those listening today, they might be feeling it right now.
I could talk about that. So, I didn't have any barriers. I was trying to get in. I was clawing my way in, because the word hope for me, I don't know what it was. Elizabeth was posting the advertisements for it, and it was Veterinary Hope Foundation, Hope. I didn't feel like there was hope. I wasn't suicidal, having ideation about that. I know our profession is in crisis, and I know all the realities of why being a veterinarian is a daily siege of so many things coming at us. And it's every emotion. We have to be on our game, but we have to euthanize a dog in one room, turn it around and see a happy first puppy. It's very emotional, draining job. But at my time, I wanted the hope. I was all about seeing what it was about. The barriers, I am an open person on my heart. I wear my heart on my sleeve. If I'm having a bad day, everybody knows. If I'm happy, everybody knows. So I didn't have barriers, but I can see how it could intimidate people. where they just don't feel like they want to take that journey. I think that should be more about, we can, try to know you should take this journey. I think every veterinarian should take the journey with Veterinary Hope Foundation for 6 weeks. It is something that you don't even know you need. It's almost that good, because it reconnects you with why you wanted to do it in the first place. I think we lose that. A lot of my friends are just like, why do we do this to ourselves? This kind of thing. And that shouldn't be what we ask ourselves. I wanted to be a vet since I was a baby, pretty much. And I never wanted to lose. It's a calling for me. So it doesn't come naturally for everybody. But I do think that a barrier would be people don't understand that it will bring you back to that, and it will give you more hope, and it will help you to keep going.
Oh, beautiful.
I would say I had not given up hope, but I wasn't sure how to find my way back to that. And I also was born to be a vet. So,
yeah, I think tapping into that is one of the things that's really powerful. Tapping into, why did we fall in love with this profession in the first place? Why did we end up where we are? And trying to get back to that passion and that joy. But it is clear to me that there are barriers. One of the things that's been a little bit funny is that when I talk to veterinarians about our foundation, they almost always say, oh, this is such a wonderful organization. We need this so much in our profession. I'm so glad this resource is available for other people who need it more than me. Almost always. Because we have this belief that, we are people that pull ourselves up from our bootstraps over and over and over and over and over again to get where we are. You can't become a veterinarian unless you take exams when you're sick and show up when you don't want to show up. And all these things, you have to learn to ignore all of your needs, whether it's you're hungry or you need water or you need to go to the bathroom or you need sleep. You have to ignore all of those things sometimes just to get through vet school, just to get into vet school probably, but certainly just to get through clinics and vet school. And so we've learned to ignore our own needs so much that we begin to believe they're not important. And so I think that's probably the biggest barrier, is understanding that this is something that would be useful for everyone, not just for someone who's hurting more than you. Well, I don't have suicidal ideation, so that's not for me. Mm-hmm. Or I don't feel like I'm in crisis, that's not for me. We can all learn to have better boundaries and communicate better, and how to resolve conflict and how to live in accordance with our values. Those are things that are good for everyone. But I also know that some of the barriers are people, a lot of veterinarians are introverted, and the idea of showing up and revealing their soul to strangers is terrifying. And so we know that. We try to make it as easy and accessible as possible. So the groups are always free for participants. You can show up in your trailer. You can show up in your car. You can be sitting on your couch. You can log in from anywhere. So those are the things to make it as easy as possible. But also part of the curriculum, not everybody's going to want to share the first day. And there are participants who sit there and say very little the whole time, but they still may get a lot out of it just from the people who are comfortable sharing their stories and themselves. Over time, as other people become more vulnerable and more open, that allows the most introverted people, or the majority of participants at least, over time feel safer and eventually hopefully safe. But we know that that is a real barrier for a lot of people. And also just being exhausted. Our groups meet in the evening on purpose because that's when veterinarians and staff are available. But if you've had a long day and you worked a 10 or 11 hour shift and you're exhausted and, oh, I'm supposed to go to that support group thing tonight, I don't know if it's worth my time. I'm just gonna watch TV instead. I feel like binging Netflix. I don't have time for this, but, I don't think anybody has shown up to groups and ended up regretting it or saying that it's not worth their time. Maybe they have, and they haven't told us that feedback, but I think for the most part, and it's not a perfect fit for everyone, but certainly the feedback we've gotten is the vast majority of people have found, or they're glad they showed up. They're glad they took time. Sort of like going to the gym, I don't want to go to the gym today. I don't feel like it. I have put my gym clothes on and carried my gym bag to the car and gone back inside and watched TV before. I'll admit that. So I think those same hurdles to overcome, but I've never gone to the gym and thought, oh, I shouldn't have done that today. I should have sat on the couch and eaten ice cream instead. Never. It's always better for you to do the hard thing that's going to improve your life. It's just that taking that step sometimes in and of itself is a barrier. So
I'll start it for me. I really struggled with believing that a group would even be helpful. Like my perception of a group was that I'm going to sit around with a bunch of other women, because of a women's group that I did, and just listen to them complain. And I'm going to come out of it feeling worse than I did going in. And I'm going to be bored, or I'm going to be, in my head, I'll be critical thinking, if you would just blah, 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 you wouldn't be here. I can hear like my own inner gremlins might come out during this group, and I would just be pissed off and annoyed, and I'd be thinking about my huge to-do list I should be working on, like my laundry, while I'm sitting here listening to you guys complain. That was my perception going in. Like I thought it was going to waste my time and make me feel worse. I was astounded when I discovered the difference. I think for me at first, it was hard changing gears from going fast to slow, because the pace in a group, it's like time kind of stops. And I remember feeling physically uncomfortable with having to drop down into my heart instead of my body and head spinning. I can see Amy. I want you to speak after this, and I think you're relating to this. And I didn't. And the thing that shifted was like that by the vulnerable shares of these other people. It's sort of softened something for me. And then I think I started to develop insight, which I didn't really have before. I think I was always running externally, focused on the world outside of me, never really taking the time to introspect. And when I opened up that portal, it was like all the answers start pouring out. It was amazing. Like all this knowledge that was locked inside and all these emotions that space created space for. But that barrier was just not believing that stuff was valuable. That was a waste of time. And I would just feel annoyed. Yeah, that might be true 1% of the time. But then there was this other like 99% of other things that were happening. So Amy, could you speak a little bit to what you were experiencing, like that kind of friction as you were coming in?
I'll say, as I said, I was in Yellowstone. I had set aside this time to be with my family. So setting aside, that was actually, we were traveling for quite a while. And so I did multiple sessions while we were on the road. And I remember thinking the first one, is this worth stopping everything that's going on our vacation for me to sit for an hour and potentially talk to some people? And I remember making a conscious decision that if I wasn't worth 6 hours, then why was I traveling the country for 6 weeks? And what message was I sending to my kids about taking care of myself? So I made it to the first session, and that was all I had to do. Sit there if that was all I could muster at that point, and really made a difference. And I think the cohort, I think our cohort is fantastic. We definitely clicked right away. Whatever the criteria are, however these cohorts are being created, definitely works. And I definitely think other people in the group, like it took us a couple of weeks to get rolling. And like I say, now years later, we're still doing that. And I do think that I had a similar, the reason I'm nodding my head is that I don't want to hear somebody else complain for 6 hours. And I don't want to contribute to that either. That's not helpful for me to sit and complain about my circumstance. But sharing and then working towards solutions was exactly what I needed.
Amazing. Laurie, you're nodding. Do you want to add on to like what you've been seeing in these groups and your thoughts?
I think it's important to acknowledge that we don't really set it up to where we say no complaining. I mean, that's not one of our ground rules, is not to complain. And I think in so many other arenas in our daily work life, we have this, we've talked about this a lot, this competition around suffering and sharing our suffering, and whoever suffers the most wins the prize. And I didn't set it up to where we couldn't talk about that or complain or whine sometimes. It just kind of led into this more hopeful, like, what are we moving toward? This was a really hard day. So what do I want to move toward now? What is my goal moving forward? How can I get there? And these other women in the group, because they were all women to begin with, but I've seen this in the other groups as well that are in the ABP groups and other groups. We don't spend a lot of time on what's not really working well. We're really looking at what are we moving toward and how do we get there, which is the definition of hope. Is the definition of hope in action. If you look at some of the work that's been done by Shane Lopez and his colleagues, is setting a goal and then creating a pathway to get there and having the agency to start working toward that goal. And so in some way, the groups tended to have that sense or that energy around, we're not going to sit in this muck and suffering. I mean, we can acknowledge it. And some groups we did longer than others because a lot of people resonated. And we have to open the space for that as well. We have to sit in the hard sometimes in order to even see where we want to move. But we didn't stay stuck there. We didn't get stuck there. And I think that was, maybe that's part of the secret sauce too with this is we don't get stuck in the muck. We acknowledge the hard. And then we also look towards the good. And how do we get there and support each other in getting there? So just in talking with it, having these people on the call has been really helpful to even to figure that out, what that is.
Yeah. So beautiful.
I think normalizing that life is hard and that things are hard and that being a veterinarian is hard or being a veterinary technician is hard or being a practice manager is hard. Like, yes, these things are hard, but life can still be beautiful, but there's hope, but there's a path forward, and approaching it with curiosity and empowerment instead of feeling stuck. Like that's such a big thing. I can still remember we had our first conversation about let's try to do something to help. And then we had a lot of conversations in the coming weeks. And I remember I was standing in the parking lot of my practice. I was still practice owner. And I said, what veterinarians need more than anything right now is hope. Can we call ourselves Veterinary Hope Foundation? Like, that's all I want is to give hope to veterinarians. And it's right there in our name. You know, if you just show up, you have to be brave to show up. You have to make time for it. You have to be intentional about it. But if you show up and you can find hope, then you can move forward, you know, then you can find your path. And that's going to look different for everyone. But if you're in a place that encourages it, that's part of, it's not ever going to be just a group to complain because it's facilitated by a licensed mental health professional who has the right perspective and can gently guide everyone to keep things moving forward. That's one of the differences in our foundation versus some other support groups that exist, is that we partner with mental health professionals right away. And we always have made sure that this is evidence-based, that there is good research, good data, good science. Like these are things that are valuable and meaningful for all human beings, and just tailored to veterinarians. So it's not therapy. That's important. It's an important distinction. It is peer support, but it's guided peer support. And that's the magic. So
it's so similar in our company. Like it's, as a former veterinary professional turned therapist, I will say firmly that I think we go together like peanut butter and jelly. I think that there's a real need for us to come together. And there are a lot of similarities, I think, in just our archetype of how we experience the world, being people that are naturally very heart-centered and empathic, but also perfectionistic and driven and hardworking. And we deal with very difficult, complex cases. And, you know, when you give a lot out and you don't get a lot back in, you know that recipe and where it's going. So I do think there's a lot of synergy there. And the model you all have created, the proof is in the pudding. Like you did all this in an experimental way. You tried it out, you pilot it, you collect data. If it's working, you keep going. And it's really, really working. As we are kind of coming down the home stretch of this, I'd like for each of you to just share one thing you want listeners to really take away today, because we've talked about a lot of information. I want you to just take a minute to check in with yourself of those listening. If you could just say, hey, one thing that's been so important to me about this, or what I really want you to know, please share that. And then as we wrap up, we'll of course let people know where to find you all so they can connect if they want to learn more. But let's just have you all each take the mic. How about, who wants to go first? Hands up. I don't want to put anybody on the spot with just one takeaway you want to leave listeners with. Okay, Laurie.
I think the one thing that I would like folks to know is that we're there for them. They don't have to feel like they're broken or suffering or struggling. The things that we talk about are common human experiences. And so there's space for everyone to bring your story, and you'll be accepted there. And there's a community of support out there. You're not alone.
Beautiful. All right, Amy.
I just really want people to know that they're worth it. It's worth it to take the time for yourself.
Yeah. How about Trish?
The one thing I would want people to know about this foundation is in this field, it's so important to take care of yourself. And I learned that the hard way, because a lot of times we don't know that we're hurting until it's too late. And this foundation really brings you to check in with all of the emotions that we push down all the time.
How about Elizabeth?
I'll just add to that. So not only do we hope to teach you how to take the best possible care of yourself, but the magic is creating space for you to take care of each other. And that is something that will continue to serve you well throughout your life, far beyond the 6 weeks. So yes, all the things everyone else said were true. Amy said, you're worth it. You're worth the 6 weeks. Laurie said, you belong just as you are. Trish said, you can take care of yourselves. And all those things are true, but taking care of each other for the rest of your lives, what a beautiful thing. You just have to be brave enough to show up.
I love it. One thing I'm going to say is just try it. If you don't like it, you can just go back to the way you've been. You know what I mean? You can go to one. If it's not for you, there's no real risk involved. There's plenty of risk in not changing. We know how that goes. It feels bad. So this is an opportunity to just dip your toe in the water. If you don't like it, take your toe out. It's fine. So that soft invitation to connect. For those who are interested in learning more and connecting with you, what is the best way for them to find you?
Well, you can just go to our website, veterinaryhope.org. You can click on support groups and then follow the links there. You can fill out a jot form, and that does not commit you to joining a specific group. So if you're thinking maybe someday down the road, this could be a good fit for me, then you can go ahead and fill out the form, and then that just puts you on a list. So you make sure to get the information about the upcoming groups. It doesn't commit you to being in a group. So that's an easy step to take if you're considering it. You could also sign up to be on our email list. We have a monthly newsletter that comes out that talks about a different topic every month and also talks about our upcoming groups. So those are both easy ways to get involved. And then if you are an industry professional and you're listening to this and you've been thinking, gosh, I want to support veterinarians and veterinary professionals, and I don't know the best way to do that, we'd love to talk to you about sponsorship. We'd love to talk to you about partnering with your organization to figure out how to best support your members. Lots of different ways you can get involved. But if there's even 10% of you that's thinking this could be worth your time, I just would encourage you to take the leap to connect with us in some way. And even if you don't join a group for a year or two down the road, you're worth it. And so just be brave and click it.
Click it. I love it. Well, each of you, Amy, Laurie, Trish, and Elizabeth, thank you so much for being on with us today. And Elizabeth, what's your puppy's name? We have to introduce the puppy real quick.
Oh gosh, Remy. I'm sorry. She was like pawing at me and I kept trying to move her out of the camera. And she was like, I'm your support group. I'm here for you, Mom. Yeah.
All the pets are welcome. I have 2 cats that love being on the show. And they look exactly alike. So you can't tell which one's which.
I was trying to play it cool and keep her right to the side, but she wanted to be front and center. So
she's welcome. This is Vet Med. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right, you all. Thank you again for being on with us today. It was really just a pleasure to speak with each of you.
Thank you so much, Crystal. We're so grateful to have you help amplify our messaging.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you feel stoked after listening to this episode. And as always, I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Is there a topic that you want to know more about? Please let me know. And thank you again for subscribing and sharing your favorite episodes with others. It really means a lot.